Please join me for a few moments of centering silence. And now, please remain seated as we sing our ingathering hymn, number 155. The words appear in your order of service, and we will sing it through 2 times, please. Good morning. Welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Madison. This is a community where curious seekers gather to explore spiritual, ethical, and social issues in an accepting and nurturing environment. Unitarian Universalism supports the freedom of conscience of each individual, as together we seek to be a force for good in the world. My name is Karen Rose Grebler, and on behalf of the congregation, I would like to extend a special welcome to visitors. We are a welcoming congregation, so whomever you are and wherever you happen to be on your life's journey, we celebrate your presence among us. Newcomers and visitors are encouraged to stay for our fellowship hour after the service and to visit the library, which is directly across from the center doors of this auditorium. Bring your beverages and your questions. Members of our staff and lay ministry will be on hand to welcome you. You might also look for persons holding teal-colored stoneware coffee mugs. These are FUS members who are knowledgeable about our faith community who would welcome visiting with you and answering questions you may have. Experienced guides are generally available to give a building tour after each service. So if you would like to learn more about this sustainably designed addition or our National Landmark Meeting House, please meet near the large glass window on what is your left side of the auditorium. And I believe that Richard Miller is our tour guide for this morning. We always welcome children to stay for the duration of the service. In fact, Julie will be reading a special story for them a little later. However, because it is difficult for some in attendance to hear in this lively acoustical environment, our child haven, back in that area, hi folks back there, And the commons behind the auditorium are excellent places to go if a child needs to talk or move around. The service can still be seen and heard very well from those areas. This would also be an excellent time to turn off all devices that might cause a disturbance during the hour, especially cell phone ringers and those cute little songs that sometimes come out of them. I'd now like to acknowledge those individuals who are helping our services run smoothly this morning. Mark Schultz is our sound operator. Our lay minister is Ann Smiley. Our greeter is Elizabeth Barrett. Our ushers are Lynn and Richard Scobie, Doug Hill, and Mark Hill. And our hospitality folks making coffee and other things in the kitchen are Jeannie Hills and Sharon Scradish. Please see the announcements in the red floors, which is an insert in your order of service. It describes upcoming events at the Society and provides more information about today and this week. Again, welcome. We hope today's service will stimulate your mind, touch your heart, and stir your spirit.
Sojourner Truth said to the preachers, and I kind of imagine she said it like that too, to the preachers. You seem to be expecting to go to some other parlor when God comes, to be taken up away somewhere. And when the wicked have been burnt and you're going to come back down and walk in triumph over their ashes. And I can't see anything so very nice in that. Coming back to such a mess as that would be, a world covered in the ashes of the wicked. Besides, if God comes as you say he will, I'm not going anywhere. I want to meet him. Nothing belonging to God can burn any more than God himself, so I shall have no need to go and away and escape. No, I shall remain. Do you tell me that God's children can't stand in the fire? I think it absurd to think so. And now, if you will rise with me as we light our own fire. Karen, would you bring me an order of service? And we will read the words in the order of service that Karen is bringing to me. Flame of life and light, blaze again in our hearts and minds as we join together in this space made sacred by our aspirations. Let us celebrate the gift that is our life as we seek the great love that makes all beings whole. And in the interest of making this community whole, I encourage you to exchange friendly greetings with your neighbors. Are any children here who want to wade their way up to the front? We have a children's story for you. Actually, anybody who's young of heart can come. Come on up. We have some cool pictures up there. Hi. Yeah, well done, you. Great. There are some awesome hats going on right now. Can I just say that?
And gloves.
And gloves.
And it's
It was your birthday yesterday? Happy birthday. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad you were all born.
My birthday was last week.
Cool.
My birthday was 2 weeks ago on Friday.
Cool. I bet we all have awesome birthdays. So, this book is about two awesome ladies named Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman. When America was young and new and wanting to be free, not everyone in America was free. It was a land of promise, a land of great promise, but not all promises were kept. And two strong, brave black women wanted America to fulfill the promise to let everyone live in a land of equal opportunity. This is their story, the story of Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth. Sojourner Truth was born first, sometime around 1797 near the Hudson Valley in upstate New York. She was born the daughter of enslaved parents owned by wealthy Dutch planters, and they gave her the name Isabella. She grew up tall and strong, bending like a willow while working in the fields along her 12 brothers and sisters. Wow. Yeah. I don't know. I bet Wikipedia would tell you. As the crow flies hundreds of miles south from Isabella's birthplace, sometime in 1825, a young slave girl named Arminita was born. Arminita dreamed of freedom, of flying away with her whole family, but she didn't know how. She didn't know when, but she knew she yearned for flight, and one day in freedom, she would be known as Harriet Tubman. Isabella this and Isabella that, forced to obey a parade of masters from dawn till dusk, sent from farm to farm, away from all of her brothers and sisters, and away from her parents. Poor Isabella. She vowed when she grew up, she would leave slavery behind and be poor Isabella no more. She would defeat those who tried to defeat her and rename herself Sojourner Truth. Arminita hungered for freedom as well. She lived in fear of being sold. She lived in fear that one of her loved ones might be put up for sale and sold to the highest bidder and shipped off never to be seen again. So like a quilt she worked on, one square at a time, she pieced together her plans for running off north. It took patience and skill. It took listening and learning. She needed reliable advice about an escape route. But she had great faith. She had faith that she was made for bigger things, and she knew that she would find those things once she was free. Isabella's master promised that he would set her free, and she patiently waited 12 long months before asking her master to emancipate her. When she finally confronted him, her owner broke his promise and said that she must stay a slave longer. But Isabella was tired of waiting, so she broke the chains of slavery herself and walked out and left it behind. Her master then illegally sold her son away, but she went to court to win him back. Isabella became a strong tower of strength that her friends and family could look at when she gave herself a new name, Sojourner Truth. It symbolized that she felt born again, born into freedom and committed to helping others find freedom. Sojourner Truth preached and lectured all over the North, from the shores of Massachusetts to the Ohio's fruited plains. She made stirring appeals to emancipate both slaves and women. Her deep, booming voice cast a spell over her listeners. And once, when a man in the audience said that women were weak and needed protection, that women couldn't take care of themselves, Sojourner Truth got angry, and she stood up her entire 6 feet. She held out her arm, made strong by years of labor, and she said, "Well, ain't I a woman?" Harriet Tubman was only 5 feet tall, but became a giant among her people by working on the Underground Railroad, which was a network of black people and white people who secretly guided runaway slaves to safety. It was not a railroad, nor was it underground, but it was a powerful resistance movement trying to defeat unjust laws. Harriet dodged bloodhounds and bounty hunters, guiding many escaped slaves all the way to Canada. She told her admirers, "I've never lost a passenger." Harriet became the most famous Underground Railroad conductor in the years leading up to the Civil War. And when the Civil War began in 1861, both Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman continued their campaigns against slavery. Tall, fiery Sojourner gave speeches all across the North, heating up audience, and tried to convince men to enlist in the Federal Army to join the battle to defeat the Confederates. Harriet Tubman, cool and collected, worked as a spy behind enemy lines in South Carolina. With an iron nerve projecting a sense of calm before the storm, she led men in uniform on midnight raids, ignoring the danger, as she always had. When Sojourner Truth was on a speaking tour in the fall of 1864, she stopped off in Boston to visit. It just so happened that Harriet Tubman was in Boston as well, taking time off from her wartime duties that occupied her in the South. No one took notes or recorded the meeting at the time, so we can only imagine what they might have said to one another. After hearing about one another so many years, they might have warmly embraced, as if finding a long-lost relative. The tall one wore glasses and spoke with a Dutch accent, while the short one still had some of her Southern drawl. But they were connected by a kinship that went deeper than language, perhaps deeper than blood, the kinship of spirit. When their paths crossed in Boston that October day in 1864, there wasn't a photographer to record the occasion, and there was no interviewer to highlight the meeting. When they parted, Harriet and Sojourner did not know if they would ever see one another again. But the sharing of stories builds friendship, and with time, memories keep us going, even if we are miles apart. It was a memory these legendary women would probably carry with them for the rest of their days. Sister Harriet, Sister Sojourner, together at last. And I hope that you all form friendships that help you do awesome stuff in the world. We're going to sing you out to your classes, okay?
Sing
Whenever I go to church service and the kids get a story and the adults don't, I get jealous. So I thought I would tell you all a story today in lieu of the reading, but it comes from a reading. It comes from one of my favorite science fiction novels, which is Octavia Butler's Adulthood Rights. Have any of you ever read the Xenogenesis series? Some of you have? Okay, well then please forgive me when I don't use the complicated alien terms. So Octavia Butler introduces us to a world, to a race of aliens called the Oankali. And these race of aliens are master genetic manipulators. They are very good at specifically breeding people to make sure that they get the traits that they want that come out in the breeding. And what they do is they go around the universe and they try to find species of beings that have almost died out, either from illness or war or what have you. And when the Oankali encounter the humans, which of course they do, because the story is so much more fun if it's about us. When the Oankali encounter the humans, the fiction is set in a time when the Cold War has turned hot, when humanity is about to annihilate itself with nuclear war. And the Oankali declare that humanity, human beings, are a failed experiment, and that they are going to take the best of humanity and the best of themselves and breed a new group that's going to be even better. And in case this experiment fails, they leave some of themselves aside to make sure that there are still Oankali left if the experiment fails. But they're not going to do the same with humans because, well, it's a failed experiment. Humans didn't work. It's okay if they go away. The human beings, funny enough, don't really like this idea. They think it's a bad idea, and they want, if there's going to be breeding, they want at least to have their own set of themselves, so they form these resistor camps. And the Oankali don't really understand, because clearly the species has failed. Why are they so insistent on surviving? So they make a construct human, alien hybrid. His name is Akin, and they make him look very, very human. And they allow these human resistor camps to capture him so that he can grow up amongst them and develop a real empathy, really understand their story. And Akin does this. He grows up half alien but raised as a human. He gets to know the people very well, and he begins to understand human beings' survival need and why they have pride in who they are and why they want to stay human. And aliens have this amazing ability to have perfect empathy transmittal. So they can touch one another and just completely transfer whole emotions and whole memories. And Akin goes back to the aliens, and he tries to do this. He tries to tell them why the humans need to exist. And I'd like to read you that excerpt. If they're going to fail, let them fail on their own. Give me at least a chance to show you not just their interesting bodies or the way they behave in trade villages, but here on earth, let me show you what they are when we aren't around. Then carefully, in the manner of a storyteller, he gave them the experience of his abduction, his captivity, his time with the humans, and his conversion. All that he had felt, he made them feel, and he did what he did not know he could do. He overwhelmed them, so they, too, at times, were both captive and convert. He did to them what his abandonment had done to him in infancy. He made them understand, on an utterly personal level, what he had suffered, what he had experienced, and what he had come to believe. As soon as the experience had ended, people began objecting to its intensity, objecting to being so overwhelmed, objecting to the idea that this could be the experience of a child so young. The people then began to converse. Akin could feel people avoiding the subject of a preserved human race. They did not want to talk about it. They began turning away, warding off. There was a denial, a revulsion. It confused him. He was too human to understand their reactions naturally, but too alien to disregard them. Still believe you. So Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman were two awesomely inspiring, strong, very courageous women. Both of them were born into slavery. Both of them claimed their own freedom. And both of them spent the rest of their lives fighting for movements of abolition and suffrage. Both of them spent their lives fighting for the promise of equality that was written in as a fundamental ethic of this country. Faith played a big part in both of their journeys. They each had a personal and deep relationship with the divine that allowed them to see this vision of humanity as they wanted to see it. And also, faith gave them that courage to do the work that they did. Harriet Tubman has been quoted as saying, "The way I see it, God guaranteed me two things, freedom and death. And if I can't have the first, I'll take the second." I had thought that I would come here today and tell you their stories and talk about how faith can lead us to do courageous things in this world. But as I prepared the service, I realized that if I want to utilize the courage that my faith gives me, I can't do that. I can't just talk about things in the past, because that would be tokenizing the courage of these women. And I want to use their courage to compel me to continue the vision of the world as they saw it. Because it's easy, right? It's easy to look back 200 years and say, how could they think that slavery was okay? It's even easy to look back 60 or 70 years and say, didn't they know that Jim Crow was wrong? But I hope that it doesn't take us 60 or 70 or 200 years to look around and say, how can the term Black Lives Matter be controversial? And that's where a little bit of that courage comes in, because I know that there are people in this room who do think that it's controversial. Or at least if they don't think that the term itself is controversial, they think that the movement associated with it is controversial. And that's why I wanted to just tell pretty stories of the past and make us all feel good, and then we could go home. But then something happened. Something happened. You all started talking to me. You all came up to me with these brilliant perspectives, with readings, with stories from your life and from people that you knew, all over the map and where you stood on it. But you sent me emails, you responded to my newsletter articles, you talked to me in the loggia and in the commons, and you showed up to events where we talked about this hard stuff. And I realized that if I didn't do the same with you, if I wasn't just as courageous and honest in speaking my truth as you were in speaking your truth with me, not only is that disrespectful, it's just bad ministry. Because I could go to one of those faiths where it's hierarchical and everybody has to do what I say, and that sounds like it might be a little bit easier, actually. But it'd be a whole lot less prophetic. Because these communities where we grapple with the fact that life is messy and life is hard, these are the communities in which we can change the world. So we talked about Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth. We honored their names. And I want to honor another name right now. I want to bring into the space the name of Octavia Butler. I already did when I talked about her stories. Octavia Butler is an incredibly successful female Black science fiction writer. I'm going to say that again. She is an incredibly successful female Black science fiction writer. And the reason that bears repeating is it is very rare to have an incredibly successful female science fiction writer. And it is incredibly rare to have an incredibly successful Black science fiction writer. So to have an incredibly successful Black female science fiction writer, there must be something going on with those words, right? There must be something that Octavia Butler taps into that people need or want. I think that Octavia Butler taps into both the very depth of our imagination and the core of what is right and wrong. She's able to transmit a story of what it feels like to be a race, in this case, the human race, to have no power, no self-agency, no ability to make your own decisions, to feel that helplessness, to feel that anger. She allows an insight into that experience, and she doesn't blame any particular person for it, right? It was the aliens who did it. And when I first read that story of Akeen, I have to tell you, I was incredibly covetous of his ability to completely transmit perfectly memories and emotions. I mean, to have that kind of perfect communication, it made me jealous, and it made me terrified. Because there's a part of me that I don't usually talk about in my Unitarian Universalist circles. It formed me, it made me who I am, but it's hard for me to bring it out because when I do, I get a lot of reactions like the aliens reacted. in that Octavia Butler reading. It's overwhelming, it's disturbing. Folks don't want to believe it's true for children. It's hard and feels overwhelming. But you all, I've gotten to know you, and I trust you, and I respect you. And you've created this dialogue with me, and I want to keep it going. So I am going to tell you a story about what it was like for me to grow up in the city of Detroit. I am not an alien with perfect powers of empathy, but I'm a decent storyteller. I once worked in Detroit schools. I worked in a program called Communities in Schools that was set up by the Kellogg Foundation because most schools in Detroit do not have an ability to fund language or music or art programs. And so they would take people that had some skills in this area, though not a teaching degree, and have them go into the schools and expose the children for a couple of hours a week. Music, language arts. I had a BFA in theater and music at the time, so I got hired into this program. And my introduction to the school was that I couldn't get into my classroom because it was flooded. Detroit is set on a marshland, and the foundation of the building was sinking and crumbling, and water was seeping in. It had been raining. So everyone in the west side of the school, all the teachers that had classrooms on the west side of the school, were packed into this gymnasium where the kids were sort of just running wild, and we didn't have lists of which students were whose, and we didn't really have a consistent group of students, so we weren't sure what to do with that many people and no supplies. So we did what we could. We played theater games, and we sang songs in French, and I got to see a little bit of all the other teachers doing things, and there was this one boy who, no matter what we threw at him, he could pick it up. He could pick it up, and he was brilliant and sharp and really engaged and interested, and I selfishly kind of hoped that he would be in my class if we ever got back to our classrooms. We did get back to our classrooms. The rain subsided and the water ebbed. I found out there were 38 children in my classroom. 3 of the textbooks in that classroom had been damaged by the water so badly they couldn't be used anymore, which meant that there were 15 left for the kids to share. But that boy, he was in my class. And he was just as brilliant, if not more. He thrived in a smaller environment. No matter what I threw at him, no matter what we did, he just seemed to get it and make it his own. He was a sweet and shining spirit. One day I caught him drawing on his desk, so I went over to discipline him, but before I could, I looked down, and I couldn't believe what a 12-year-old had created. There was this sort of demon statue that you would think a 12-year-old boy would draw, but then it had these amazing, immaculate angel wings. It was complicated, and it told a story, and it had a place, and he had done it all with a dull pencil on a school desk. I tried to create a relationship with this child. I talked to him about coming back to school and taking more time to draw. I even eventually talked to him about the College of Creative Studies, which was a couple of miles from his school. I was like, "You are so bright and so talented, you could definitely get a scholarship." One day he frankly looked at me and he was like, "Miss Julie, I'm never going to college. I'm already working for my brother." In my community, sometimes illegal transactions are done by children because they will have less harsh of a punishment if they get caught under our legal system. I still had hope for him. He seemed so one of a kind. I went back a couple of years later to the high school that I thought he might have gone to. And at first, no one would talk to me. I was an outsider. I asked around, but nobody would admit to ever having known that this boy existed. And then I saw some of the students that I had taught that did recognize me, and I asked about him. His family was still around, but no one had seen him for about a year. He had just disappeared. And so when people say, all lives matter, It gets me right here because his didn't. And his is one of dozens of stories that I could have told. And then some people might say, but there was a criminal element in that community. That community has been so cut off socially, politically, and economically from everything our society deems legal and within the bounds of acceptability. And then some might say, well, what are we going to do? Totally look into every element of our society, politically, socially, and economically? There are people in my community that are dying consistently, even casually. I think that merits some looking into. It's often said that Octavia Butler writes herself into her stories. And if I could write myself into the story of Akin, I would retain that ability to transmit perfect information, but I would eliminate the overwhelm. I would eliminate the feeling of helplessness, because I have gotten to know you, and you are a community of great integrity and a community of great agency. You are the farthest thing from helpless. And you do not have to go to Detroit to find a place to make a difference. Here in Dane County, we have the highest rate of incarceration of people of color per capita anywhere in the country. And you know who knows about that? And you know who's working on it? Your Moses team. You already have people making a difference, beating back that helplessness here in this community, and you could go talk to them. And you know that feeling of like struggling with Black Lives Matter and statistics and wondering how you feel about it and how race affects you spiritually? Do you know who's working on that? Your equity team. If you're having issues wrestling with this, they will talk to you. You have a brilliant community right here that is already working on these things. You know, I bet many of you have heard about Flint, Michigan, right? What's going on with the water there? The people of Flint had an emergency financial manager come in because the state thought that the democratically elected voices were not doing a good enough job. And that emergency financial manager made a decision, a financial decision, to make the people of Flint drink water that was corrosive. And now children are drinking water and turning up, testing positive for lead poisoning. And there was a mother in Flint. Who said, if you want to help my babies, don't just send them water, join the revolution. And maybe you're a little stuck and you don't know how to join the revolution and you don't even know what that looks like or what step to take. So I would say, lean on the brilliant voices again in this community. Kelly Crocker, a couple of weeks ago, asked us all to envision the kind of person that we wanted to be, to use our imagination to think of who we would be if we were our most fulfilled selves. Octavia Butler would tell you that you cannot be that person until you live in a world that is how it should be. And we know that Octavia wrote herself into her stories, but now we also know that Octavia wrote herself into her reality. She unfortunately died a couple of years ago, and when people read through her journals, there were these brilliant and amazing stories of herself as a best-selling writer, even though the publishers didn't want to publish her work. There were these amazing stories where she had enough for her family and could give them what they needed. And there were these amazing stories about the entire world having enough. And so I wonder what would happen if we continued this dialogue, and I'm going to ask you to do so. By some fluke of the schedule, you have to deal with me being in the pulpit 2 weeks in a row. So I am going to ask for all of you to continue to be curious and courageous, and think about what we could do to bring about our own personal revolution. I want you to write about a world that you want to live in. What does it look like? What did it take to get there? And I want you to write yourself a role in it. What did you do when we all stood up and realized that there were communities that were hurting and it went against our principles to continue that? And I want you to send it to me. I want you to send it to me so that we together can create the next step going forward, so that we together can create our own story of what this community is going to do. I want you to know that unlike anything else you would send me, unless you specify, this communication won't be confidential, because your dreams are too brilliant and inspiring not to share. Send me your thoughts this week. What can we do as a next step as human beings? The only limit is your imagination. And despite what the aliens might think if they were looking down right now, I think we have some pretty good stuff to work with. May it be so. Blessed be. And amen. In continuing that vision of the world, our offering today will be taken for Planned Parenthood. The Senate once again decided to vote to defund Planned Parenthood. Let's try to make a little bit of that difference. It is the 65th wedding anniversary of Bob and Nancy Dott. They are the folks that have contributed this lovely bouquet for us. And I wonder what Bob and Nancy are going to do now that they've gotten to know each other. We have a Cares of the Congregation book out here for you every week if you care to share anything with us. And now would you rise in body and or spirit for our final hymn, number 149. Lift every voice and sing. The choir earlier sang, "Soon I shall be done with the troubles of the world," and we've been singing all about these gods and talking about this God of Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth. And the thing is, we may not in this room vision God the same way that they do, and we may not believe that God has promised us anything after this life, which means that we, to be done with the troubles of our world, need to work diligently on this earth. Good luck and blessing on the journey, my friends. Please be seated for the choral closing in the postlude.